Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us tonight are the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages as they reach us all the time from a busy night of football. Telegraph, a young glove focusing on Arsenal's 16-year-old goalkeeper Jack Porter as the teenage sensation steers the club past Bolton with ease in the end. Guardian also covers Arsenal's success with two-goal hero Ethan Nwaneri highlighted. They also talk about Rodri's injury, a very bleak financial picture for Premiership rugby there. The Eye has Manchester United couldn't beat Erik ten Hag's boyhood club, and the Eye newspaper says it leaves them with 20 questions. There's also coverage of Heung-min Son's claims that players' workloads must be reduced if they are to avoid burnout. Well, Miguel, let's start with the front page of the Telegraph Sport then. Arsenal 5, Bolton 1, young glove at the headline. Keeper Porter, 16 breaks record as Nwaneri, 17 nets twice in rout. After a physical and emotional game against Manchester City, how confidence-boosting was this, Miguel?
Yeah, it's a lovely headline. A bit of an elixir as well, as you say, given, well, not just the Manchester City game, but I think that actually took the previous week to extremes for Arsenal. There was obviously a lot of issues like suspensions, the injuries, the intensity of a derby followed going away to Atlanta, and then, of course, the nature of that game in Manchester City. So to have a run out like that where you can play youth can be revitalising. And I suppose with a lot of the kind of feeling around Arsenal at the moment, the age of that team is a little bit of a throwback as well to maybe kind of some of Wenger's days. And when he would attempt to make a virtue of bringing through young players, especially in the League Cup. And I suppose it just adds to the good feeling as well as maybe just the sort of win that was needed after three relatively attritional games for different reasons.
Absolutely. Next up for Arsenal, away to Preston, who are currently 21st in the Championship. David, inside the Telegraph is the headline, Porter and Nwaneri shining lights after week of darts arts controversy. Sam Dean at the game tonight. Experimental, as Miguel says, but would this be a nice confidence boost to win the League Cup? It's not a competition they've won that often, Arsenal.
It will be one they'll be looking to make progress in, and especially Mikel Arteta. He won the FA Cup in 2020 behind closed doors, not got a trophy since, and this is a presentable opportunity. He has actually named very strong teams in the League Cup in previous seasons and has drawn a bit of criticism for not turning to young homegrown players, questions about the strength of Arsenal's academy at the moment, when you see clubs like Manchester City and Liverpool in particular winning the cup last season with a number of young players. But then tonight that sort of turned on its head. Okay, perhaps a little bit by default in goal with Raya's injury and the fact that Neto was cup tied. But he's shown confidence in Nwaneri, who I thought was absolutely outstanding tonight. If you watch him with both feet, his balance on the half turn, creating, scoring, full of confidence. He's a real part of the first team setup now at just 17 years old. Miles Lewis-Skelly has been in and around it for a little bit too. He came on at City, of course, on Sunday as well. And then even somebody at right back like Josh Nichols, a little bit of action in pre-season. I thought he played really well tonight. And Arteta blended it well with the experienced players too. So, of course, if Arsenal go deeper into the competition and starting at Preston away, they're going to play more experienced players. That will be tough, a weeknight at Deepdale. But this wasn't easy for those young players, even though Bolton are 18th in League One with just a couple of league wins this season. But I think that will be fantastic for them after the City result on Sunday. And it's been a really good couple of weeks for Arsenal. And this kind of, in a way, caps it off and gives them optimism for the future.
Yep, Leicester coming up in the Premier League for Arsenal. Taking the Guardian sport page there. Teenage dream for Nwaneri. Arsenal's 17-year-old fires first goals in Bolton rout. Jota and Gakpo ease Liverpool past West Ham. We'll talk about that in a second. For Nwaneri specifically, Miguel, how important a night, because he made his debut at 15, didn't he? And sometimes there's a lot of expectation on these young players. It can be difficult to realise that.
Yeah, and obviously from 15, he's still there and still thriving. I mean, and there still is very much a lot of expectation around him. He is someone, I mean, the words that have been repeatedly said to me have been basically in the lines of that if he doesn't become an Arsenal regular, something has gone unexpectedly, just because they think that highly of him. And also think he's exactly the player that can eventually slot in to that creative midfield role. But that's also where I suppose it's maybe interesting over the next few weeks, and it's a classic case of potentially crisis being opportunity in the way it used to be in football, I suppose, before big clubs had quite so much wealth and spending power. Obviously, PSR has imposed on that. But, I mean, obviously, ideally, Arsenal would not want an injury to Martin Odegaard. But given they've come through this difficult spell of games, given they've got, at least superficially or on the surface, a bit of a forgiving spell now, that's potentially the opportunity to blood a player like Nwaneri, to give him some proper minutes and allow him to get a proper feel for the first team in the Premier League without too much pressure. You'd think maybe bringing him on in the Leicester game, maybe even starting him, might be the option now. But certainly there's a lot of hope for him and and now there's opportunity as well to go with that.
Yeah, just wonder what the future holds for Arsenal. Nice tweet post on X from the official Arsenal account. I think we can show you that. Young Gunners making us proud illustrates just how young they are as well. David, what's your sense on this? All the clubs want to bring through fantastic talent. Could this be a special generation? We still look back on those class of 92 pictures with fondness, don't we?
I think that's possibly going a bit far. A bit of caution needs to be exerted on this, because if you speak to people within football and with real expertise on the youth scene, Arsenal have had a bit of a struggle in this cycle, and that's no major criticism. It does happen, and these things are cyclical. So there are some of the younger age groups at Arsenal who are really exciting, such as the under-16s from what I hear. But in this one, it really did seem to be Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly. But tonight and on the bench in Europe against Atalanta, even at City, started to see a few more emerging as an absolutely outstanding talent coming through at Arsenal, one of the best in the country, Max Dowman. And so we'll be seeing a bit more of him in recent years. But we've heard so much on and seen so much, rightly so, on Manchester City, on Liverpool, on Chelsea, Manchester United. Now maybe Arsenal coming back to the fore. And that's such an important part of their sort of DNA and their history, as Mig said earlier, with Arsene Wenger and Mikel Arteta perhaps hasn't done it as much, and understandably so. But now perhaps he has an opportunity to. And really, when I see Nwaneri play, I think he can slot in and get regular game time in that creative position. And also, he's an important part of his country's plans as well, under 17 Euros over the summer, and then going forward to the upper age groups. You know, we're talking about lacking creative players perhaps at international level over the last decade or so, but maybe it looks like some are coming through now, and Nwaneri is certainly one of them.
Indeed, future is bright at Arsenal. Let's talk about Liverpool, another big win for them. 5-1 against West Ham. Both sides made a lot of changes. The Eye has it at the top of the paper there. Jota and Gakpo at double. Liverpool 5, West Ham United 1. Miguel, how good is this Liverpool squad?
I think it's. I mean, Arne Slot was left, say, in a much more promising position than David Moyes was at Manchester United in 2013, or that Unai Emery was at Arsenal in 2018. That is one major difference in kind of in preparing for the transition into a new era from the departure of a club patriarch, a legend in that way. Liverpool did put in place it more. Klopp was influential to that. So although the squad isn't completely perfect, I think this is one reason why Liverpool didn't buy, or well, they barely bought it all in the summer, and there wasn't that much movement, because they felt the squad was in a good place, and it was only at this point about signing specifically the right type of players for the position, Zubimendi being the one big saga that didn't come off. And also there's depth there, at least for these sort of games and these sort of competitions, as you can see with the way they've gone about tonight. I mean, for all the talk about Liverpool, I think this is almost more interesting as regards West Ham. I mean, given I suppose, through all the debate about David Moyes, the success he still had through a competition that maybe others would consider lesser in the Conference League, well, maybe West Ham could, given the results at the moment, they could have maybe aimed for a bit more here in the League Cup. But instead, it's just perpetuated some of the gloom about the place, which is obviously quite in a lot of contrast to Liverpool, who, other than that result against Notts Forest, which now just looks like a blip, has been all up under a new manager.
It's true, Liverpool, the holders safely through. They go to Brighton in the next round. West Ham out. Still no domestic trophy since 1980 in the FA Cup. Let's go to the Mirror and just take in their back page as well. We've got the Manchester United story. We'll get to that in just a second. Don't worry. Nice headline. But Jota slots in 2 for Arna. David, let's talk about the West Ham angle. 2 wins in 7 in all competitions for Lopetegui. Cause for concern, or is it a transitional time? And has it just been a bad fixture list when you look at the opponents?
A bit of everything there, Teddy. So it has been a bit of a bad fixture list. It is a period of transition and there is pressure building, no doubt. And that will come on Julian Lopetegui. It will come on Tim Steidten, the sporting director. It will come on the ownership, David Sullivan and co. And that's the nature of the beast at an expectant club and fan base with a great, massive stadium. Progress was made under Moyes. European title to their name, European qualification on top of that. And it doesn't seem to be working out just yet. They haven't clicked. Some of the signings haven't hit their straps just yet. And there will be questions about some of those signings. You know, Fulkrug, 30 plus years old, 20 plus million pounds. They're going to have to come good. And you know, you just feel when you look at how they're playing, and you listen to some of the commentary around it and you hear what the fans are saying, that this is a rocky period ahead for West Ham. And, you know, they were absolutely outclassed by Liverpool tonight. And if you looked at the lineups, they were perhaps a little bit stronger in theory, that should have at least held their own. They could have had an early goal, an Ings disallowed effort, and they got back on level terms through the Quansah own goal. But Liverpool just stormed through, and that strength in depth that Liverpool have got there, that the quality of the senior players often gets overlooked, but also some young players coming through themselves. And by the way, one thing I didn't mention that Arsenal need to move on to, which Liverpool have done so well, is sold fantastically young players and made profit out of that and still replenished. All things that a club like West Ham at the moment are not exhibiting, and they'll need improvement. We see one new head coach in Arne Slot who's doing a fantastic job so far. And the Liverpool structure, as Miguel's outlined, it's still early days, but they seem to have made some pretty strong decisions, and it's paying dividends. And that's not happening at West Ham yet, and they'll be desperate to turn it around.
Indeed, difficult time for West Ham, and then you manage to go to Brentford at the weekend. Gentlemen, we'll take a quick break there. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including coverage of that tough night for Manchester United. Welcome back. You are watching Back Pages tonight, and it's welcome back to the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein. David, I'll come to you on Manchester United. Back page of the Mirror. We saw that headline before. Had a little chuckle. Reds lamb chopped. Ten Hag denied by old club as United stumble. I think we started the evening, a lot of us saying it's pretty hard not to qualify from this Europa League. But are United going to make a good fist of it on the evidence of tonight?
It wasn't a great audition this evening. They go to Porto in their next European game. Before that, they've got the not insignificant challenge of Tottenham, and after the European tie, Aston Villa. So some real domestic focus coming up, and they'll want to pick up more points in between against Porto. It was sort of more of the same. Erik ten Hag still trying to impose some sort of style and identity and gel some of these new players into the team. Xerxes, the only attacking signing, and you did feel a bit more was needed there. They will look to subsequent windows to improve in that department and get sort of players back fit, like Rasmus Højlund, of course. But it's a tricky time, and you know, it seemed they'd turned a bit of a corner around the time of the Southampton, and then followed up with the League Cup victory. But this wasn't great. The equaliser was sort of calamitous defending and from the collective, and it leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, they had sort of chances and pressure to win it, but really they should be seeing off an opposition like FC Twente. And Erik ten Hag is the man that needs to deliver the results. He got backed with a new contract and more recruitment. There is patience required. Still relatively early days of the new regime and so many changes on and off the pitch. But that wasn't the best night for them, and they are another team who need to pick up pretty significantly. Yeah,
Ten Hag saying pre-match you hate to hurt the teams that you love. Perhaps he probably hopes on reflection that he had hurt them a little bit more. Miguel, the back page of the Sun, trouble Dutch, 20 fan Ten Hag counts cost of Eriksson blunder. In fairness, Eriksson has scored a fine goal before giving the ball away for Sammy Lammer's equaliser. But where do we stand with Manchester United? What's the direction, Miguel? Are they progressing, regressing, standing still? What's your take on direction of travel?
I mean, I think it's an apt question, because I was about to say that this has actually been a pattern since, I would say, at least Van Gaal, which is basically the club going on what seem encouraging results, only to have an immediate and abrupt drop back. It probably reached a kind of I think there's a particular pattern under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Mourinho as well, but it's really come back with a vengeance under Ten Hag. Now, I do think that speaks to long-term structural issues within the club that obviously the new football leadership are trying to address, but also some of it has to go on the manager as well, especially given that some of it is related to structure and performance. And it's one of the things that struck me on Saturday. I was at the game at Selhurst Park, and obviously through a lot of that era that I'm talking about, one of the main criticisms of Manchester United has been often they've been a team that lack any sort of tactical shape or idea, but because they can afford such a good squad or afford to pay so much for players and have a high wage bill, individual quality often bails them out. Now, on Saturday, it was almost the opposite. They finally had a bit of shape, but individual accuracy let them down. It does feel like that stunted the momentum that they did have from, though, admittedly, wins against two teams, the two games they should be winning, although obviously the Twente result tonight was a different spin on that. They had forgiving games against Southampton and Barnsley, but they've already squandered any kind of positive momentum like that. So it's not as bad as it was, say, after the 3-0 against Liverpool going into the last international break, but it's just like this cloud hasn't gone away. And this is the sad reality of United's season at the moment, given how strange the summer was, really, where we had this bizarre situation of a manager essentially being interviewed for his own job while the club actively looked for alternatives. In that, unless Ten Hag basically goes on a blistering winning run for a long time, this isn't really going to go away. And at the moment, they do look off that. In relation to the Eriksson goal tonight, I suppose this is maybe sums up another thing with United at the moment. Tonight, there's always this kind of negative or something that comes back, because just before the Eriksson error, Ugarte had actually done really well. So it's an issue going forward, yeah.
Certainly is an issue going forward, and actually looking at the future matches to come as well. David mentioned Porto. After that, it is Fenerbahce and Jose Mourinho in this competition, so it could get very interesting there, particularly for the journalists covering that one. Now, Heung-min Son was mentioned on the back page of the Son. Son up for love. We might have saw on the left-hand side. Says that maintains there's no problem between him and Rodrigo Bentancur, only love. Tottenham skipper says Bentancur was close to tears as he apologised for discriminatory comments made about the South Korean. Wanted to talk about Heung-min Son and fixture congestion as well, a familiar theme in the eye. Postecoglou and Son join growing chorus speaking out on fixture congestion. David, it seems inconceivable, but the more you listen to these players, is a strike beyond the realms of possibility?
It is sort of gathering momentum in a way that it hasn't in the past when this has been talked about. And it's getting to the stage where you think, will something give? And, you know, people raise the issue of money. If players want to play less, will they accept being paid less? And then you look at the competitions that are being expanded, the Champions League, the Club World Cup. I mean, I still can't get my head around the fact that many players are going to be playing in a tournament next summer, a competitive tournament, when they're meant to be off. It's not meant to be a tournament summer. And some of those players, by the way, will cross over from being under contract to being out of contract. We don't even have the details for that tournament. And look, we don't want to get our violins out and feel too sorry for players that are being paid huge amounts of money, but there does seem a divergence here in what the players and staff, managers want, coaches, versus what the ownership want, who all seem to be up for more and more competitions and matches, which chimes with the FIFAs and UEFAs, the competition organisers. And it does feel that it's sort of coming to a head. Injuries seem to be increasing as a result of these long seasons, and it doesn't feel sustainable. But who blinks first? Is it the sort of actors, the protagonists, or is it those paymasters? I don't know, but it doesn't feel right.
A difficult picture as well, maybe fan fatigue as well, with all the games coming up, as you say, next summer as well. Sometimes it's nice to have that break in anticipation, isn't it? Let's talk about a man who's spoken on this topic, but sadly is going to be missing one of the Premier League's best players, if not the best. Rodri, the Guardian, injured Rodri, a massive loss, but I can step up, says Matheus Nunes. Is it an opportunity for him, Miguel, or would you expect to have Kovacic in there? How do you see them replacing Rodri?
I'd imagine that actually, rather than directly replace Rodri, that Pep Guardiola comes up with a series of alternate solutions depending on the game. Like, we might even see Phil Foden in there, given how good he is in small spaces with the way Guardiola has spoken, or Rico Lewis coming in. I think Guardiola will explore all of that. It does point to Rodri's importance. And I think actually it's worth saying, I think it's a tragedy really that a player that good, who we are talking about one of the best in the world now, who had specifically warned about the calendar a few days beforehand. Now, we can't directly say that his injury was a result of the calendar, but it's not exactly a factor that makes things more favourable for players. And David's touched on something there that I think is worth addressing about the wages. I mean, from one perspective, I think this whole issue is really an example of football's wage race going mad. I think people focus on the wrong thing. I mean, there's always this argument that players earn so much they just put up with it, but I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Ultimately, as fans, as journalists, we're watching this. A lot of people are paying for it, obviously, not necessarily journalists, but fans, and they do want the best product. They want to see the best performance. And the calendar is eroding that. And I think you can see a classic example was in Euro 2024, where a lot of squads obviously went in exhausted because of the relentlessness of the calendar. I think it did maybe affect a little bit of fan enthusiasm for it. And this is another side to all this, that in this kind of big quest to make almost this never-ending football calendar and this attempt to constantly have big games, it means nothing ever feels that big because we're always on to the next thing. And it does have the danger. I mean, I know this is...
Miguel, I'm going to have to jump in there. I'm really sorry, Miguel. The show time has beaten us. We will talk about this topic in the future, no doubt. Miguel and David, brilliant to have you on Back Pages tonight. We'll speak to you again soon.